Welcome back, everybody, to more of the Eden of Grisaia. I do apologize about there not being a video on Monday, but there's one today, and kind of ended on a cliffhanger last episode. Sachi now has to defuse a bomb, part of Thanatos' little test. Its contents were, unfortunately, exactly what she'd feared. For a moment, the world seemed to lurch around her. Gravity was pulling her in every direction at once. On the lid of the box, below the letter she just removed, was a countdown, displaying the remaining time in segmented numbers. They had 7 minutes and 16 seconds left. Furrowing her brow and biting down on her lip, Sachi drew a quick, sharp breath through her nose, then turned the pockets of her skirt inside out. No doubt revealing a bomb defusing kit she just so happened to have on her person. Sometimes said that a woman's skirt pockets are full of mysteries. But these particular pockets were stuffed with what Machina called Sachi's secret tools. They made something of a racket as they clattered to the ground.
Sachi! Oi, Sachi! どうしたのよさ? なんかあったの? 大変、マキちゃん。爆弾見つけちゃったよ。これを解除するのが今回の課題みたい。
Sachi looks pretty confident in that picture, doesn't she? She's like, yeah, I got this. I've defused bombs hundreds of times.
マジでか? どうすんのよさ? 時間も自信もあんまりないけど、やってみる。マキちゃんは逃げて。アホな子一女子。なんか手伝えることねえの？じゃあ、教会の中に戻ってカーテンの暗幕を持ってきて。了解したのよ。
With a dramatic flourish of her skirts, Sachi lowered herself to the ground. Her eyes were fixed on the small black case before her. There were a total of 6 screws holding the upper plate in place. All of them could be removed with an ordinary No. 2 Phillips screwdriver. But when she looked more closely, she realized that one of them was sticking up slightly out of its hole. This was a very common trap. The one loose screw was almost certainly reverse threaded. Turning it to the left would tighten it, bringing it in contact with the switch that would set off the bomb. That's interesting. Given the presence of this mechanism, it was safest to assume that the other 5 screws were also potentially dangerous. For the time being, she decided to stick the blade of her flat screwdriver under the lid right beneath the loose screw. Prying it open slightly should allow her to peek inside. But after a moment, she stopped and blinked in surprise. The gap between the box and its lid was sealed tightly with black silicone.
つまり、光センサー式の起爆装置か。
Oh.
もしくはガスが封入されていて、蓋を開けて箱の中に光が入ったり、ガスが抜けて気圧が変わると爆発する仕掛けかな。
In the latter scenario, there wasn't much she could possibly do. I mean, what do you do against that, really? With a gas-based mechanism, you couldn't even cut a tiny hole in the box and slip in a microfibroscope to see what was inside. There were only 2 real ways to dispose of a bomb like that. Either you worked in an airtight chamber where you could slowly equalize the atmospheric pressure inside and outside the box, or you just gave up and detonated it remotely.
バルーンを使って気圧操作しようにも、そんなもの持ち歩いてないし、持っていたところで箱の中の気圧を調べるための密閉ドリルがない。
Sachi did have a toolbox containing specialist equipment of that sort, but given its extreme weight, she opted to leave it behind in her locker at the Mahama dormitory.
Oi, Sachi! 暗幕持ってきたのよ。ありがとう。取りに行くからそこに置いておいて。サチンどうよ。やれそうなの。
It's not looking good.
わかんない。やれるだけやってみるけど。 やっぱりマキちゃんは逃げて。うんにゃ、どこにも行かね。私はノーメックスのメイド服着てるから多少の爆発なら耐えられるけど、マキちゃんはね、お願い避難して。死ぬなよ。約束できる？大丈夫。約束するよ。 約束破ったら地獄まで追いかけてパンツむしり取って泣かしてやるの
Alright.
信じて。じゃあ頑張れ。
Makina clearly wasn't happy to go. If anything, the look on her face suggested severe reluctance. But after a moment's hesitation, she placed the curtain on the floor and scampered back down into the church.
信じてとは言ったものの、これはどうしたものか。
Before anything else, she draped the thick curtain Makina had brought her over the box. From this point forward, she relied mainly on her sense of touch. Given that a letter had been taped to the box, it was reasonable to conclude that there weren't any electrostatic sensors on its surface. Simply touching it wouldn't set it off the box. Wouldn't set it off.
残り時間は5分弱。箱の大きさから考えれば200メートルも離れれば十分だと思うし。
This is the most intense I've ever seen this game.
残り時間が3分を切った時点で手に負えないと思ったら諦めて全力で逃げよう。
Slipping her hands underneath the curtain, she began by reaching out to tap gently on the lid of the box. As a general rule, vibration sensors are oriented downward because of Earth's gravity, making them slightly less sensitive to vertical impacts. Repeatedly tapping the lid with her fingers, she looked for places where the sound seemed hollow, and selected one of them as the point where she'd drill her hole. Once this was done, she'd cut herself a bit of tape about 5 centimeters in length, temporarily placing it next to the spot where she'd be drilling. If gas began to escape through her hole, she'd use this to cover it up before the air pressure inside the box changed too drastically.
できれば液体窒素で処理してからが良かったんだけど。
Damn, I left my liquid nitrogen at home. She didn't have any on hand, and these days some bombs had backup sensors that would react to sudden drops in the temperature. Pushing these thoughts from her mind, Sachi brought her drill to the box's lid, positioned it carefully, and began to turn the handle. She worked slowly, carefully, and as quietly as possible. If gas began to escape from the hole, she'd have to move quickly to apply the tape before the bomb exploded. A small leak shouldn't be fatal. The volume of the gas inside would naturally change as the temperature outside fluctuated, so a hair trigger sensor wouldn't really be practical. Soon enough, she completed a tiny hole in the aluminum case, or aluminium, less than 0.1 millimeter in diameter. There was no sign of anything escaping through it. Apparently, she didn't have a gas trap on her hands. That's very good. We don't want that. So one weight off her mind. As she exhaled in relief, Sachi could feel sweat pushing its way out of her pores. She wasn't out of the woods yet. It could still be equipped with geomagnetic, vibration, thermal, or light sensors. Geomagnetic and vibration sensors could easily set off a bomb prematurely. If they were present at all, the settings would probably be rather lax. As long as she didn't pick the bomb up or start kicking it around, there shouldn't be a problem. Also, the box was black, meaning it absorbed and released heat quickly, and in the course of drilling into it, she confirmed that it was not insulated. She could probably assume that it was not equipped with a thermal sensor that could react to the heat of a human body.
ということは、残った問題は光感知。
Like the other types of sensors, overly sensitive photodetectors could be risky, and required you to take great care when transporting your bomb. You'd usually give yourself a margin for error. In other words, a brief exposure to relatively dim lights probably would not trigger a reaction.
爆弾解除にはずとか。
Yeah, right? I was gonna say, that's a lot of probablys they're using. Probably won't blow up, maybe. On a good day. That said, how would she have done things if she'd been the one planting this device? Sometimes you gotta look at it from another angle, right? What if you were making the bomb? What would you do? Not that I condone anyone making bombs, because, you know, it's illegal and all that.
私ならそうする。
Nodding to herself, Sachi shined her flashlight in through the small hole she drilled in the lid of the box. In response, something within began to beep a faint but unmistakable warning. When she lowered the intensity of her light, the tone of the sound shifted as well. Ooh, so it is light-based.
これは当たりだね。まず間違いなく光感知センサーが仕組まれてる。
Just in case, she tried using an infrared light as well, but a different sensor reacted audibly. Oh, interesting.
つまり暗視装置は使えないってことか。
How do you defuse what you cannot see? There were 3 minutes left. This was the sink or swim, right? If she decided she couldn't do it, she'd just get the hell out of there. If she was going to run, it had to be now.
手探りで どこまでやれるかわからないけど。
She'd come so far already that backing down was no longer an option. Leaving the curtain draped over the box, she set about removing the screws from its lid, guided only by her sense of touch. The screws in question were commonplace panheads, judging by the small punch marks she could feel on their heads. They were made to the international standard. Carefully bringing her screwdriver to bear, she began removing the screws that turned to the left. Those that did not turn left, she turned right instead. One of them refused to budge either way. It was a dummy. She ground down its head with her drill and snipped it with her wire cutter once it was sufficiently weakened. She used the same approach on the booby trap screw she'd noticed earlier on. Removing the lid would only have taken a few seconds if all the screws had been normal, but the drilling ended up costing her quite a bit of time, and it's not like we have a lot of that to spare. After pausing briefly to catch her breath, Sachi pushed her flat screwdriver under the box's lid and slowly pried it loose. A bit of pressure was sufficient to tear the silicone seal holding it in place. At long last, she had access to the insides. Tracing her fingertips along the various components, Sachi began to map out the structure of the bomb. She had to identify all of the sensors by feel, and then cut them away one by one.
これがバッテリーかな。静電源と副電源に予備電源。
Jesus.
タイマー用のリチウム電池を入れると4電源。バッテリーから切り離しても起爆回路が一旦オンになるとゲート信号をオフにしてもサイリスタはオンのままになる。発信した電圧はコンデンサに結合されて、サイリスタがオンになるとコンデンサ以降の電圧はほぼ0ボルトになるから、
Based on what she felt, Sachi tried to piece together a mental image of the circuit, all the wiring that led from the batteries to the primer, including a number of dummies. But with no time to take notes, it was not easy. Everything was getting jumbled up in her head.
こんな時、風見さんがいてくれたら、やっぱ無理でした。
Think Yuji could defuse a bomb? Cutting away all the sensors that connected to the explosive device itself would not take too long, but if she severed the wire harness connected to the main battery, the sub-power system would sense the drop in voltage, activate, and set the bomb off. Before cutting one off the main power source, she needed to use an alligator clip as a jumper to create a bypass, and hook up a battery of her own, using a volume dial and a crystal oscillator to control the frequency of the current, thereby establishing a temporary circuit that would prevent the system from realizing the main barrier had been disconnected. Once this was accomplished, she could safely cut the main wire harness. Even if the sub-power system's reverse circuit activated, the electricity would not reach the detonator. However, no oscilloscope available to her, she had to control the volume of the signal based solely on her instincts.
電源の規格が決まっている以上は、ある程度は予想がつくけど。
Closing her eyes, Sachi took a deep breath and brought her wire cutter to the thin 0.5mm harness leading to the main battery.
大丈夫。間違ってない。
With a small snip, she cut through the wire. Oh boy. Oh boy. It had not exploded, obviously. That was a good thing, of course. But right now she was simply deceiving the bomb into believing that its main power source was still active, with the help of a single 9-volt battery. Unless she used this time to deal with the detonators, the secondary power sources would activate as soon as the timer hit 0, and the bomb would go off. The actual primer was an electrical type, embedded in the explosive material itself. Her only option was to drag out the wires hidden in the bottom of the box, bypass the detonator using resistors, and then cut them off one by one. Taking her drill, Sachi quickly made a new hole in the side of the box, then used a pick she made from the spoke of a bicycle wheel to pull out the detonator wires. In total, there were 15 different harnesses connected to the transistor current and the capacitor. That included positive, negative, and disconnection detection wires, so it was impossible to tell them apart simply by touching them. After pulling the wires through the new hole, she studied them under a flashlight, then connected them to the dummy load resistors of various values, isolating the detonators so that she could sever them. This is the longest 3 minutes I've ever seen, with the resistors serving to hide the surge in voltage that followed every cut. She steadily worked her way through the wiring that led to all 5 detonators. Last one. Once the detonators were silenced, she could theoretically dropkick this bomb across the roof without fear of it exploding. But had she overlooked anything? If she had planted this bomb, she would have implemented a backup mechanism that would activate in this very moment of relief. Slowly and cautiously, she double-checked the wiring, but found nothing unexpected. She couldn't feel any extra explosive materials on the box's lid, or its interior walls either. The classic trick here would be a wire that pulls out the pin of a grenade when you relax and pick up the box. But there didn't seem to be anything of that sort either. Thank God. We don't need any surprises when defusing bombs. As Sachi allowed herself a deep sigh of relief, the countdown timer finally ticked down to 0. Naturally, there was no explosion. Thank God. Whew. Boy. Oh boy. Oh boy. Did you see that, Kazami-san? Looking up to the sky, she saw her beloved instructor's face, and couldn't help but boast to him.
Oi, Sachi! Owatta no? Mou jikan sugite kedo, bakudan dou natta no? Nantoka seikou shita mitai.
There's a fun game out there called, what is it, like Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes or something. It's like, basically what it is you have a bomb and you have friends or whatever, and they have a manual. They can't see the bomb, so you have to relay them information about defusing the bomb to them, and they will relay the steps to actually do it. It's a really fun game. I've watched people play it. Like, it's kind of like this.
Wakaru もし私が失敗したらどうするつもりだったの？そん時は一緒に死んでやる。見殺しよりはマシじゃんね。ダッチもねえこん一丁らんで終わったんならちゃっちゃと降りてこうし。マキちゃん、電話。
That was the wrong bomb.
タナトスめー。おーこらー、私らぬっ殺す気か。
あらびっくり。電話に出たということはまだこの世にいるのかしら。
おめえふざけんなよ。爆弾とかやりすぎじゃねえの。
What if it wasn't a real bomb? What if it was just like a dummy bomb?
ちょっとしたドッキリイベントじゃない。そんなに怒らなくても。
マキちゃん、これプラスチック爆弾じゃなくて、
I called it.
粘土だよ。やられたね。
Man, that's such a dick thing to do.
これはあくまで能力査定試験よ。本物を使うわけないじゃない。
You say that like we would know that if you would use it or not. Like, oh yeah, she's not gonna put us in any kind of danger. Like, we don't know that. We don't even know her.
とはいえ、装置自体は本職の人間に作らせたものなのだから、それを解除したことは正直に驚いたし、褒めてもあげましょう。
Well, to be fair, Makina, well, she brought the curtain, so I guess she helped. But Sachi was the one who did all the heavy lifting.
でも、解除できるように作ってあったんですよね。
そうね。解除できる爆弾とそうでない爆弾の見分けがつくかというのも審査の一つだったわけだし、私はあなたの出した結果を高く評価します。
もう、完全にもてあそばれてるのよさ。
箱の中の手紙はもう見つけた？
手紙だ？
Wait, there was a letter inside the box?
これかな？
Oh, another letter.
あったよ、マキ
Same
ちゃん。
letter.
よろしい。ではサイモンが言いました。その手紙を松島みちるに渡しなさい。
まだ続くのかよ。
制限時間はちょっと長めの60分。
60 minutes?
もう時計は動いているわ
Easy.
よ。急いで。
なんだこれ。なんかイライラするのよさ。今すぐ何かに八つ当たりしたい。ものすごく。
Don't kick a puppy, they don't like that.
仕方がないよ。急ごう、マキちゃん。
Something gonna happen on their 60-minute trip back? It was frustrating that things were not going the way she wanted, and it was frustrating to be ordered around by someone who didn't bother to explain things properly. Makina understood this frustration was fundamentally childish, But when no one even bothered trying to coax her, it was hard to accept this kind of treatment. Of course, being a grown-up was all about swallowing your frustrations and finding ways to cope with situations you couldn't accept on an emotional level. But in this particular respect, Irishi was still something of a child. Orders from the people upstairs are always going to be unfair. If they were fair, there wouldn't be any reason to issue them as orders, now would they? Might as well quit if you don't like it. No one would stop you. That's just how things are in his line of work. If Kazami Yuji were here with them, he probably would have told her something along those lines. Clutching the letter they found inside the box, Makina and Sachi set off running down the road they'd follow to the church. Their eyes were searching for a certain bottle of blonde, presumably lying in a heap somewhere in the vicinity. Alrighty, well that was a pretty intense episode. I think I'm going to end the video off a little prematurely. But Friday, I'll have an episode up for sure. So I will see you all then. And I hope you enjoyed today's episode. And if you did, make sure to like the video and subscribe if you want to see more of the Eden of Grisaia. Have a good Wednesday.